Doctors were outraged. Are you daring to say that I can be the cause of my patient's illness? There is a lot of ego and stubbornness that has characterized any change of paradigm in medicine. And so when did that change? When did we accept something that was invisible to our eyes and went back to accepting mind, body, spirit science? We're going to take a brief dive into the history of the science advances that led to the acceptance of the mind-body connection. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Spirit. I'm your host, Dr. Diely Pichardo Johansson, retired board-certified hematologist-oncologist and twice cancer survivor. So, changing paradigms is hard, and doctors are known for being stubborn. Dr. Jeffrey Radinger does a great job talking about this in his book, Cured, about spontaneous remissions. I highly recommend it. That germ era that I talk about, that didn't come easy. Doctors went kicking and screaming. That time, doctors were outraged. How dare you say that something I cannot see with the naked eye is killing my patient? Obviously, you're crazy. You're saying that invisible forces out of my control and that my senses cannot perceive are killing my patients? Sounds a lot like the conversation we have now about how spiritual effects can influence your health. And there is a story we'll share someday. Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician working in Vienna in a maternity ward, who said, we should wash our hands after doing autopsies and before delivering babies, and decrease drastically the mortality rate in the maternity ward. And yet he was demonized when Lister brought the theory about sterile procedures and cleaning your instruments before a surgery. Doctors were outraged. They hated having to take those extra steps. Are you daring to say that I can be the cause of my patient's illness? There is a lot of ego and stubbornness that has characterized any change of paradigm in medicine. And we are seeing that now as we are moving away from a scientific materialistic paradigm to one that is open to spirituality. So keep in mind, stubbornness, ego, and clinging to old dogma have been the greatest obstacles to make scientific progress. Just keep that in mind. So when did that change? When did we get over that absolute denial and refusal to accept something that was invisible to our eyes and went back to accepting mind, body, spirit science? Well, it's interesting to mention that there have always been separate forces complementing each other in medicine, the conventional forces and the holistic wellness forces. Around between 1870 and 1930, the Sanatorium movement peaked. Back then, right before we discovered streptomycin and we could treat tuberculosis, back then tuberculosis was a death sentence, doctors noticed that patients who were resting more, spent lots of times outdoors, ate well, had a good nutrition, and especially were isolated from the normal stress in their lives and relaxing, some of those patients got cured. And even the ones who didn't get cured live much longer. So that started the Sanatorium movement, where people would go hide for months and rest. And I've always said that was the first seed of holistic medicine, and that was the beginning of mind-body medical spas. But then comes the 20th century. We started talking about psychosomatic medicine. Alexander and French published the first paper in the 1930s, and this was a theory that was still crude, but said that some personality and emotional patterns could influence physical symptoms. Then in 1977, George Engel proposes the biopsychosocial model of health, saying that health and illness are a product of interactions between biological, psychological, and social factors. I was fortunate that my medical school took that as their motto. The patient is a biopsychosocial entity. However, my experience and most of people from my generation who trained in the 90s, the chapter about psychosomatic medicine in your book was mostly in the mental health book, and it was about how to avoid difficult patients. We talk about hypochondriacs, and we talk about people with malingering and Munchausen, and the nightmare of every doctor, somatization disorder patients. Then the foundations of mind-body medicine as a science started in the late 20th century and the early 21st century. It was validated by neuropsychoimmunology in the 1980s or so, when studies started showing that the brain and the central nervous system were directly involved with our immune functions. Then came some epidemiological studies, and the most important of all was the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Event Study, published in 1998. This proved that when someone had 3 or more childhood traumatic events in their history, they had, just to quote you a couple of the findings, twice the risk of developing cancer and developing stroke. These were very robust findings. Then later on, another example that's worth mentioning is Takotsubo Cardiomyopathy. In the 1990s, these Japanese doctors reported these patients with complete normal coronaries and healthy heart who had a very traumatic, heartbreaking event and developed heart failure very suddenly. They call it the broken heart syndrome. And that was proven and became widely accepted, even published in the New England Journal of Medicine in the mid-2000s, providing an undeniable link of emotions causing physical documentable damage to your body. What I'm proposing now is that we are moving away from that skeptical scientific era to a new era where now with the science of biomedical medicine, we are reintroducing body, mind, spirit into the medical conversation. If in the past, doctors were obsessed with cure because previously they could only comfort, now is the time to value comfort and cure both equally. If in the past, doctors were obsessed with control because they were compensating for the previous powerlessness, this is the time when we combine agency with surrender, with knowing that there are forces outside of our control, bigger than us, that play a role in the path of wellness. And if in the past we had banished spirituality from the conversation as a reaction to the excess control of religion in the past, this is the moment to open up to spirituality as a key component of, at the minimum, mental health, but I intend to continue to prove in these conversations also intrinsically related to your physical health. So, what are the takeaways from today's conversation? First, medicine has always been slow to accept paradigm changes. So if you hear people saying, this is bullshit, this is not true, this is woo-woo, don't believe them. And if you are one of those people, learn from your ancestors. The scientific era of medicine was crucial for the advancement of the discipline, but represented an overcorrection and therefore has an expiration date. We have to go back to balance. If you are a scientist or medical provider, learn from the mistakes of our predecessors. Be smart. Open your mind. Don't be the guy who was embarrassed later because he didn't believe in bacteria. And if you are a dissatisfied patient or a spiritual seeker, know that you are on the right track. It is true. There's a lot wrong, and it is a process, but we are changing the paradigm. Ignore anyone who tries to put you down, put your beliefs down, and tell you those theories of spiritual healing are unscientific. The scientific materialist paradigm is on its way out. That's all for today. Remember, some truths are invisible and impossible to measure, yet undeniably real. Love is the best example. Stay open-minded, make joy part of your wellness plan, and here's the takeaway. The best thing you can do for your health is to love your life. See you soon.